Hi, this is Maximilian Osinski, and you're listening to Talking Lasso.
Yeah, I believe in hope. I believe in belief.
Honey, is that an ingredient or is that something you're just calling it right now? Ingredient. Shoot, I was kind of hoping it was the other one.
How worried are you about the threat of relegation?
Well, Lloyd, right now I'm mostly concerned with the definition of relegation.
Congrats. You both just met a cool person.
On three. 1, 2, 3.
Yo. Oh, I can't hear you, Josh.
I muted on the software, and I I usually mute on the hardware, so I confused myself.
That felt like going right back to working from home at the start of the pandemic. You're on mute, Josh. You're on mute.
I am not a cat. I promise I'm not a cat.
That was peak lockdown humor. I promise I'm not a cat.
It's exactly what a cat would say.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing, Joey?
I'm good. It feels very different. I'm back in the dark after our lovely recording in the day. I've got bags under the eyes. I'm sat in the dark. But, you know, I'm back to London weather, and I guess you're back to not London weather.
We're getting close, although it is warming up. So the London weather might be a bygone era for this year, at least.
Wow. Well, that would be nice if it was an era rather than all day, every day here. Anyway, Josh, before we forget, as we always do, I'm going to say that this episode of Talking Lasso contains spoilers for Ted Lasso seasons 1, 2, and 3, but most importantly, Ted Lasso season 3, episode 8. We will never have Paris. So that's out of the way. We've actually remembered to do the spoiler warning. Well done, us.
I think we've got like 3 weeks in a row now. I think we might have to stop saying every time because we're getting close to a 50% ratio.
We're turned over a new leaf. We're podcasting, Josh. This is how it feels. Josh, how did you find this episode this week?
A little infuriating, but I think in a way that not in the sense of like the storytelling was bad, more in the sense of like some character moments, which we will obviously be getting into. But overall, I thought it was a pretty decent episode. But it is an episode that is pushing us towards the finish line. I think more than anything, it seemed to cover pretty quickly in the beginning that Richmond is on an upswing and people are about to hit weird. I say weird, but like important moments in their lives within the show.
Yeah, I agree. I described it to you as a carrier episode because, as you said, we're kind of hurtling towards the season finale. We need some episodes that just kind of give us that carrying moment to reach our final destination, not like the Final Destination movies. So, Josh, we're gonna do the same as we've done for the last few episodes because I think the flow works a lot better that way.
It's been a good format for us, I think.
But I think we should preface this with, I don't think it's going to take us as long as the other episodes have because rather than 6 stories, this episode mainly focused across 4 main themes, right? So we've got Ted, Keeley, Nate, and the team.
Yeah, thankfully no Rebecca psychic storyline this week, which I'm all here for. Like I love this version of Rebecca that we got for this week's episode, but the storyline with the psychic and everything has just been so weird, and I'm just going to be very happy when it's all said and done. Like whatever her final arc ends up being that makes her happy. Hooray for happy Rebecca, but you could have done something a little different than have a psychic lead her down a path.
Let's not forget that Ted Lasso does not always end happy. We had the end of season 1 where they got relegated. And I know that they had the positive kind of saying, oh, we'll come back and we'll fucking win the whole thing. But the relegation was still an unexpected downturn at the end of season 1. So with this rumored to be the last season of Ted Lasso, I can see things ending well, but I wouldn't rule out some sad endings for some people.
Sad endings or unfinished endings. Because if this was in fact the final season, we would be seeing more advertising as Ted Lasso the final season. As far as we know, everyone in sorry.
Do you think that that's the case? You intent on feeling that this isn't the last season?
I think it very well could be, but they might take like a 2-year break in between.
Okay.
But the studios are usually pretty heavily invested in advertising to get that, like, those late subscriber pushes of like the final season, you can't miss it. Where this has just been Ted Lasso season 3.
Fair enough. Okay, cool. I also, actually, no, I'll tell you about that at the end because it relates to our quiz. So let's talk about some of the stories, Josh. I think we should start with Ted, if that's okay with you.
I think that's a perfect place to start.
Great. So Ted's story is all about Ted and his ex-wife. We've learned all about Dr. Jacob, who we hate because Ted doesn't like him. We've learned that Ted's ex is in a relationship with Dr. Jacob. And at the start of the episode, when we see Richmond's kind of upturning form that you spoke about earlier, the commentary team says everyone around Richmond must be happy, but the happiest man of all must be Ted Lasso. And we cut to him sitting in the pub looking miserable, kind of zoned out.
He's very melancholy.
He is, yeah. But he sat opposite. Her name has slipped me. What is
it
his
Michelle?
ex-wife called? Michelle, yes. She sat opposite Michelle and Dr. Jacob. And they are obviously visiting with Henry. And they essentially say, look, you have Henry for a few days. We're going to take a surprise trip to Paris. And Ted takes this as Dr. Jacob is going to propose to Michelle. And it's safe to say that he's not on board with it, right?
Correct. He is definitely not interested in this development, especially considering, as far as we're aware, this is a relationship that's maybe a few months old. Like, it's definitely not a year.
No, if you map it against where we started with Henry at the very start of the season versus where we are now, which I would put us probably 4 or 5 months into the season. In that time, we've had Michelle being completely single, Dr. Jacob coming on the scene, and now Ted worrying about them getting engaged. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Not a long time at all.
Yeah, so maybe Dr. Jacob's a hopeless romantic, or maybe Ted's the hopeless romantic who would propose after 12 weeks of a relationship.
Maybe. Works for some people.
Yeah.
Well, it took me 6 years, so I'm not the man to speak to.
I was a little less than that, but
just a little.
Just a little.
So I think that there's a few points in this. So with Ted seemingly having made this up, the first thing he does is call a meeting with the Diamond Dogs. And the best thing about the meeting with the Diamond Dogs is Roy Kent's reaction to the meeting with the Diamond Dogs. Ted says, let's get this meeting of the Diamond Dogs together, and Roy goes, oh, for fuck's sake, and storms out and goes into his old office where he's not interested again.
But he also clearly can hear everything that's happening, and so he's invested in it. He just won't let anyone know.
In typical Roy Kent fashion, I think he is developing and he is becoming softer, but he doesn't want anyone to think that he is becoming softer. So they're showing that well. But the Diamond Dogs basically tell Ted that he's jumped the gun. No one's actually said that they're proposing, but Ted is convincing himself, and I think to an extent some of them, that this is going to happen, because he was like, he also gets Rebecca involved, but he asks questions like, if you wanted to be proposed to, where would you want to do it? And they're like, oh, Paris. And when he talks to Rebecca later, he's like, oh, where did Rupert propose to you? And she says, oh, that's not important right now because it was Paris. So I kind of understand why this is in Ted's head. I do feel like we are flitting around quite a lot with Ted's emotion with Michelle. And I understand that it's a complex thing, letting your ex-wife go and the mother of your child go. But I feel like there's a lot of flip-flopping between I am okay with this, I'm not okay with this, now I'm okay with this, now I hate the guy and I'm not okay with it again. I can't tell whether it's about Henry and his relationship with Dr. Jacob and not wanting to be replaced as a dad or not wanting to be replaced as a husband for Michelle. That's what I struggled with this conversation.
I can see it being more the Henry situation. I think Ted has accepted what's going on with Michelle. It doesn't mean he's over it, but he has accepted the circumstance as it is.
I don't know that he has, though, because if you look, so cutting all the way to the last shot of the episode, it's Henry, Michelle, and Dr. Jacob getting in a taxi to go back to the airport. And I think if it was about Henry, they would have cut to seeing Henry climb into the taxi and turn around and see Ted waving from the window, where actually it was Michelle who we get that really long shot of them two looking at each other from across the town square as she gets into the taxi and drives away. And I know that a bit of it is kind of relief, and spoiler alert, that Dr. Jacob didn't propose, but I think that quite a lot of it was about affection for Michelle rather than Henry himself.
They have set up something where clearly Michelle might still have feelings because if we go all the way back to, I think, episode 3, after Ted comes to terms with his feelings about Jacob being around, he has this moment with Michelle, says, hey, we're going to be grandparents together. Just because we're not married doesn't mean any future kids of Henry's aren't going to be ours as grandparents. And at the end of that episode, it cuts to Michelle with this vague smile on her face. And we don't know if that's like her having a weird emotional reaction to Ted, where she's like, this is the man I wanted him to be. And instead of this, like, just hopeful we're going to get through it and not actually deal with our problems kind of guy. So I think there is clearly breadcrumbs being laid out that will lead to Ted and Michelle maybe trying to get back together by the end of the season. Maybe it won't be definitive because, as we discussed earlier, maybe there will be a 4th season that they have to kind of balance that out, because if you just get them back together at the end of the season, you're kind of removing any potential drama from that relationship.
Potentially. I think the other thing that was important in this episode, this story, and I feel like the way that we told it maybe jumped around quite a lot. This is entirely my fault for my lack of notes on this story.
Oh, you're not alone on that one.
Yeah, I don't think it needed it. And I think that the long and short of it is Ted was not happy with the thought that Michelle would be engaged, specifically to Dr. Jacob or otherwise. And he has Henry to look after. And as a part of Henry looking after, there was a really good scene where Coach Beard and Ted, why Coach Beard is there, I have no idea, but I enjoyed it nonetheless, cooking him breakfast and saying, what do you want to do today? Let's go to a museum. We can see the sights. We can go to the London Eye. We can do this, that, and the other. And he says, I want to go and see a football match. And the only football match on at home in London that day happens to be Nathan Shelley's West Ham at home. And Ted manages to get very good seats, very close to the dugout, and they wave at Nate on the touchline, and he looks angry about it. And that was really it for that bit, which I thought was quite strange. I thought because they showed that a lot in the trailers, and I thought they were going to make quite a big thing of Ted going to support Nate in his new role, but actually it was about Henry wanting to go and see a match, and it just happened to be the match that was on that day.
Yeah, and I thought I liked it, and I took Nate's look more as like confusion, and like seeing Henry. He obviously has a good relationship with Henry. He has no malice. He feels no malice towards Henry, and we see that later in Nate's storyline when Rupert texts him, which we'll get into. But I liked that moment a lot because again, I like this storyline that we're doing with Nate, but I think as we've been discussing in the Discord channel, it could have been done a little bit better with what we see now. We're not quite seeing that through line that really kind of meshes well with the Nate we saw at the end of season 2.
Yeah, I think we can get onto Nate a little bit more in Nate's storyline, but I think there's definitely a discussion there. But what I'll move on to for Ted is he asks Rebecca to hire a private investigator, and we never actually hear the results because Rebecca agrees to do so. but we never hear the results of the private investigator because Michelle comes back with Dr. Jacob, but Ted lets it go. And there's a really lovely scene where Beard, Henry, and Ted are at a pub after the match, and there's a busker outside singing Hey Jude, and Ted's on the phone to Rebecca saying, I really need to know. And Rebecca says, just let it go. Your son's here. Spend time with him. Enjoy yourself and go and sing Hey Jude. And I think that that shot and that scene with Beard, Henry, and Ted singing Hey Jude, I had no idea that Hey Jude was about a child going through divorce.
Oh, neither did I.
And his parents. But I just think that was so lovely and well done that I'd like to go back to episode 1 of Talking Lasso and retract everything I said about how much I didn't enjoy Henry's performance, because I thought he was great this whole episode.
He was really good, yeah.
So, yeah, I'm a changed man. I'm very pro Henry now. Is there anything else that's worth adding to Ted's story here, or?
Yeah, he really didn't. It was really just him, Beard, and Henry. Like, he had the two interactions with Rebecca.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, it was a pretty contained story. Like, even him with the team. The only other thing I would say with Ted's storyline is maybe mentioning that Trent Krim was inducted into the Diamond Dogs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm enjoying Trent Krim's involvement more with the club rather than being a fly on the wall. Every single time we see him, he seems to be more and more important to Richmond, which I think if he's an author writing a book about Richmond, surely is a bit of a conflict of interests.
Yeah.
I feel like, when you watch nature documentaries and they're like, oh, the cameramen can't get involved and they have to let nature take its course. And I feel like you have to let nature take its course if you are going to produce a book about a football team or a team in general.
Yeah, I mean, he's morally compromised anyway because he has like some kind of working relationship with Ted. So,
true.
I mean, it's just it's a piece that he has a vision for, and hopefully his writing integrity does not interfere with his emotional attachments.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm saying it from a very real world perspective, but actually, I just enjoy Trent Krim. I think he's a great character, and I'm enjoying him getting involved more. I
would love it if one of the final pieces if this does end up being the last season, if one of the final pieces of merchandising would be Trent Krim's book being released for fans to buy.
That would be very good.
Because they used to do that for the TV show Castle, starring Nathan Fillion. They had a ghostwriter write the Nikki Heat novels that Castle was writing in each season.
Right. So we've covered Ted. I think because we've been speaking about him so much, let's talk about Nate now. I had it down in our running order that Keeley would be next, but I think Keeley's is far more important. So let's talk about Nate. Lead the way, Josh. Where are we with Nate's story?
So Nate wakes up in bed next to Jade, and he pulls the brand new romantic comedy trope of, I woke up early and brushed my teeth so that my breath doesn't stink and we can make good impressions. And Jade's like, you're adorable. My breath stinks. Smell it.
Jade's quite real, isn't she?
Yeah, she gives no fucks and she does not mess around. And then Nate even reveals that he went to the bathroom in his neighbor's flat because he was too embarrassed to maybe wake her up if he had to go for too long. And then Jade just lays a good smooch on him and just starts going to the bathroom. And Nate's like, all right then.
Yeah. And then he drops the whole, what are we line. I think the whole thing with Nate's story is he's trying to get a label for himself and trying to understand where he is. And I think we're also seeing in this story exactly what you predicted of Nate wanting a Richmond environment at his new club. And we see that with his, what does he call them? He tries to do the Diamond Dogs.
It's the Love Hounds?
The Love Hounds, yeah. With West Ham's version of Higgins, who has no idea what's going on.
He's
and the assistant manager,
the
assistant manager who also doesn't want anything to do with it. So Nate calls the first and last meeting of the Love Hounds. Whoa, whoa.
Yeah, the only thing that happens really in this one is apparently he also invited Rupert, which Rupert had no interest in being there for it. Which he, from what I remember, uh, Nate just said it was a special meeting. He didn't say that it was going to be just like superfluous. Let's have a moment to just be real with each other, kind of thing.
But I think what we're seeing with Rupert is another example of manipulation in that he was very present, very there all the time for Nate at the start of the season. And then as it's gone on and on and on, he's becoming really distant and making Nate depend on him more and more,
Mhm.
which is key behavior in manipulation.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that this season is kind of missing. Like, I get that it's Ted Lasso, but it has built out into this ensemble where I think we needed to see more of Nate's relationship with Rupert being corrupted. Like, we
Mm,
obviously know as viewers that Nate's being manipulated, but Nate doesn't know it because
yeah.
usually the victim of manipulation never knows it until it's too late. And I think we needed to see more of that.
I think we'll have an episode that centers around the blow up, certainly, because being real, that's what they're setting up for here.
Yeah, honestly, I would not hate it if we got um what was the Last of Us DLC episode?
Oh,
Left
the
Behind.
mole one, yeah,
Yeah, the I think it's called Left Behind, but yeah, it's the one where uh Ellie goes to the mall with her friend, and it kind of just takes place over the course of a day. Like, I wouldn't mind if we got one of those episodes where it flashes back to the start of the season and we
mm,
see Nate at certain points in the season where Rupert just kind of starts treating him a little differently. Like, we had at the moment where he gave him the car and
yeah,
he set him up with Anastasia. And then let's go from there. Like, let's see what has happened from there that's made Rupert so distant and cold to him all of a sudden.
yeah. I like the idea, but I think that we could get something like that. I think we'll certainly get the climax of Rupert is an asshole again because we've had one of them in each of the seasons so far. So why break a trope now?
Yeah. So with Nate, he has his match where Ted and Henry and Beard show up, and after the match, Rupert texts Nate and says, "Hey, sorry about Ted. It won't happen again." And Nate, initially, his gut reaction to respond is, "Oh, I thought it was funny," and he immediately deletes it because he knows that's not what Rupert wants to hear. And he
Yeah,
says, "Good." He has a regular breakfast date with Jade at some point in these interceding scenes, and then his arc just kind of ends with him and Jade acknowledging that they're boyfriend and girlfriend.
yeah, yeah. So let's have a quick chat about Nate and the point that Matt made in the Talking SMAC Discord. You should join that and talk to us about Ted Lasso. If you're here, you clearly love it. So join in the conversation there. Let us know what you think. But Matt thinks that, and I'll read it word for word, it's really neat that we spent so much time to pay off a heel turn for Nate so that we can still be focusing on him being nervous about his crush in episode 7 of 12 of the open brackets, presumably final season. And then he's clarified, it's not neat, it's baffling, and I don't understand why we're doing it. I don't mind it. I think we're still seeing the Nate that we know from season 1.
Yeah,
Um,
and I don't hate it either. Like, I jokingly uh, combated Matt in some of these lines, but I do think that having a little bit more shown, not
mm,
or maybe a little bit more told, not shown, with Nate and Rupert. Which again, maybe there is something coming up where we're gonna get like the what would it be? The penultimate episode is gonna be this like rewind of Nate becoming the Nate of old, or like a Nate 2.0 and not Nate the dick that left the team. um I just I understand the criticism for it because it's not entirely consistent, but the heel turn also doesn't make complete sense if he's just 100% an asshole, because he doesn't know how to be an asshole.
yeah,
He's
true.
just hurt, and that's the point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I see Matt's point. I do understand because we left season 2 and It was when he destroyed the Believe sign and stormed out when they'd been promoted. And it was very clear that Nate was going to be the bad guy when it rocked up at West Ham, because they're another London club. They'll be rivals in some form. And Rupert is involved. But I think my point was Nate from season 1 and even the start of season 2 really was the Nate that we're seeing now. And people don't change entirely over such a short period of time. I think that it's okay that we have nice Nate, not just asshole Nate.
Yeah.
We haven't really seen asshole Nate all season apart from episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
Which
and that's another thing I thought we were going to be getting in this season was kind of the two sides of the same coin kind of thing, where you've got Ted doing the lasso way and Nate doing his version of it, where because he's not openly encouraging his players, he's treating them the way he treated Colin in season 2, that we would see kind of like a falling out with the team just being like, we're not playing for this guy, that he treats us like shit.
We've seen surprisingly little of him at West Ham, to be honest with you. We've seen bits of him in his office, but there's been one scene where he was interacting with the team, and that was it.
Yeah, and like the match against Richmond where they ended up winning, we only saw that the team respects his ability to call plays and they understand his hand signals that he throws out there. But there's not anything that really shows us the kind of manager he is, other than the insinuation that like, oh, the team's doing really well.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, I'm happy to move on from Nate if you are.
I am very pleased to move on from Nate.
Okay, cool. So let's move on to Keeley. I think the meat of this episode, the real core storyline, and this kind of ties in a little bit with the team, but let's keep that as another story a little bit later on.
I will do my best.
So first scene we get with Keeley is, besides seeing her in the crowd when Richmond have their upturning form, the first scene that we get is Keeley and Jack lying in bed together, clearly just kind of enjoying each other's company, clearly just not a care in the world. And then all of a sudden Keeley's phone blows up and she's getting all these messages, and they check it, and it turns out that a video that Keeley had made of herself for an ex-partner had been leaked online. Jack describes it later on as a porno, which I'm not sure I would agree with, but an explicit video of Keeley has been leaked to the press. And that is the basis of this whole story. So, Josh, I don't mind if you want to pick this up here.
There is one setup piece you missed, which is Jack was initially bringing Keeley to a polo match.
Yes.
She had invited Keeley, and Keeley's like, oh, I don't know how to ride a horse. And they're like, oh no, we're just there. Jack's like, we're just there to watch. And you get to wear fun clothes. And Keeley's like, oh great. I need a reason to go shopping. So that's when she starts hearing her phone ding, and that's when the shoe drops. And we find out that this is a massive leak. Jack is going to start going into damage control, try to find out if she can get the video taken offline, see what they can do to help retain Keeley's reputation as far as like a business person.
Well, what she says is, I'll take care of it. And the implication definitely is, I'll get rid of the video. The video won't be online anymore. That's how Keeley took it. And I think that's how all of the audience would have taken it as well.
Jack clearly invests in NFTs.
Yes. And she described herself as get away with murder rich earlier in the episode. There was a line, I think it was in the last episode rather than this one, where Keeley, it was in the last episode, Keeley questioned how rich she was. Mm-hmm. And she said, think about Jeffrey Epstein's friends rich, which I thought was a fucking wild throwaway line.
Yeah, that one fell really awkwardly flat for me. I'm like, ooh.
It's not what you want to think about when you're watching Ted Lasso.
No, not at all. That was definitely an intern threw out a joke, and they were like, let's see if it lands.
It did not. But we get to Keeley in her office, and Barbara comes in with piece of paper from Jack. I think still expecting Jack to have been able to work miracles and wipe something from the internet here, but it turns out that it's just a statement professing Keeley's regret and sincere apology for the video itself. And this hurts Keeley. This really hurts Keeley.
Yeah, and it shows a lack of empathy from Jack. Like we understand that she's jealous, or she is the jealous type. But this really felt like a really strong bad turn for her. Like obviously last week we were setting up the breakup. I didn't think it would happen this week. Spoiler alert, it is this week. Or maybe it isn't. We don't know. Maybe they were on a break. But Jack sends this really strongly worded letter that's basically like trying to convey like Christian values kind of apology of like, oh, I'm ashamed that this happened. I'm ashamed I ever made the video. It's embarrassing that it ever got out. And I feel like a modern business person, an apology shouldn't have to happen in this situation, which I feel like should have been a very obvious thing, because Keeley didn't leak this video intentionally. It was a private video that was just hijacked from the internet. And it's one of those things where if Jack had even like a normal amount of empathy and wasn't just thinking of like herself or how embarrassing it is for her to be seen with Keeley after this, she literally would just have to say, hey, this sucks that this came out. Please just don't watch the video if you feel like you actually have a soul.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Or she could have just said to Keeley, this sucks. It's going to be embarrassing. I understand that. Let's go out and do something and take your mind off it, which she kind of does, but she does it in a way that is like reinforcing that embarrassment.
Yeah, she never acknowledges the fact that it sucks for Keeley that this private video was made public. It's just the fact that Jack is kind of hiding her own embarrassment now, but she still kind of wants to be with Keeley. So she's trying to find a balance, but it's never in a healthy way.
Well, so the way that she tries to take her mind off it, Keeley goes out and buys an outfit for the polo gala match tournament, whatever you call a polo gala. I'm not posh enough to know.
I call it a My Fair Lady event.
The My Fair Lady event, and the My Fair Lady outfit that she's wearing is, well, it's something. But Jack basically says, I cancelled that because I thought you would be embarrassed. I thought you wouldn't want to go, and really lays it thick that she's done that for her, but it's quite clear that she's done it for herself.
Yeah, she said something to the effect of like, I didn't think you'd want the press to be pressing you on all this and asking questions. And Keeley kind of takes it in stride. And she's like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, so they go and play mini golf instead. And they seem to be having a really good time until someone that Jack knows recognizes her, and they go over and have a chat. And Jack introduces Keeley as her friend Keeley, which is a real U-turn on the announcing their relationship in the office, and a real U-turn on everything that we've seen before this, where Jack is love bombing Keeley. Because this is Jack's world, so it's like a level of embarrassment or denial from Jack that Keeley and her are actually in a relationship.
Yeah, and Keeley clocks it right away. She knows that Jack is now no longer all in, or at least she's no longer as invested as she was, because her new hot girlfriend is now kind of an embarrassment within her would be considered an embarrassment within her circle. Even though, again, if you're an empathetic person, and especially as being a billionaire, presumably, you would think that they would have some kind of respect for like, oh, these dang hackers always breaking into our stuff and putting our private information online.
Yeah.
My buddy Lonnie had his private plane information put on Twitter every day, and he just ended up buying Twitter. You make a joke about it, but
that was good. You should be a writer, Josh.
Thanks.
So I think that there's another thing that I keep doing in this season. This season in these episodes, and that's praising actors who can act with their face and act without saying a word. And Juno Temple, who plays Keeley, once again in this scene, you can really read how much it hurts that she's referred to her as her friend rather than her partner or her girlfriend or whatever. I think the thing that was really interesting about Keeley's story is we get a couple of reactions. So we get Rebecca's reaction, which is sort of like what you would think Jack should have done and said, fuck it, it's annoying, but it's out there and you have nothing to be ashamed about. You have Roy Kent's reaction, which is, I'm really sorry to hear that. And it seemed like a really good reaction, but then he turns around and says, who was the video for? And that kind of just bad question.
Yeah, that's a moment where they needed to create a little bit of conflict between Roy and Keeley, or maybe they wanted a reason for Roy to screw up just so he's not the one going to comfort her at some point, because that's the only reason he would ask that question, is because a writer needed him to not be there to comfort her.
Because it's quite clear in the video, they show a bit of it before it got explicit, where she says something like, you're away at Newcastle this weekend and I wanted to let you know that I was thinking of you. So obviously it's for a footballer because of the wording of what she said. But so you have Roy's reaction of that. You have Jack's reaction, which is like very self-preservation and selfish and very cold as well. And then you get the best reaction, and the reaction that Keeley wanted the whole time, from Jamie, who it turns out the video actually was too at the end of the episode. And not the end of the episode, sorry, the end of this story. I really think that this whole story was handled really, really well. And I think that having the display of different reactions towards Keeley is quite reflective of what you would imagine would happen in real life if this happened to someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially given relationship statuses and everything, because while Jack's reaction is infuriating, especially for someone who is probably used to having their private life invaded, it really didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because the lack of empathy from her just it kind of infuriated me, even though while watching it I was like, oh, this is what they're going to use to break them up. It's going to be one of the straws that breaks the camel's back, but instead it was the entire straw that broke the camel's back.
Well, you've used the word infuriating quite a lot this episode, Josh, including your main descriptor of the episode. It's a long throwaway from where we were last week, where you gave this the episode a 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite say it's a filler episode, because there is a lot of plot development that goes on, but it is, like I said at the beginning of the episode, we're putting the pieces in place to push towards the finale.
Yeah, definitely. So the other key thing that happens here, as we've said a few times, is Keeley pushes back on Jack and her approach of having this statement. She says, I'm not going to apologize. I shouldn't have to apologize, so I won't. Jack asks her, is there more videos like this out there? Which, once again, is the worst question. Because Keeley said in this episode that there's topless photos of her online anyway, but this was just a private video, which is why it hurt her so much that it got leaked. Jack, when Keeley says that she's not going to apologize, Jack essentially storms out, says, I'm leaving, and Keeley says, are you going to come back? And she says, I don't know. And then you get Jamie, Mini Roy, coming to Keeley's house and apologizing because he makes quite a big thing, and we'll get into that in the team section, but he makes a big thing of making sure any photos of him that are explicit in any way are deleted from everything so that they can't be tracked or leaked. And he says, I forgot about email. I forgot to delete the email. So the leak has come from Jamie's email because his password was so secure that it was password. But don't worry, he threw them off by having 2 S's, which was a really good joke.
I like that one, yeah.
But yeah, it's come from Jamie, and Keeley isn't angry. She's not mad at Jamie at all for this. And I think that Jamie's clear, obvious regret for what has happened could go back to our episode 1 prediction and have Jamie and Keeley have a thing together. When you said that on a break, I was going to say, does that make Jamie the copy girl? But I don't know how much you enjoy Friends. So, yeah.
I get the reference.
Okay, good.
See, I took that a different way. I took that as them solidifying, them being the writers, solidifying that Jamie is absolutely okay with just being a friend to Keeley, because of the way he's talking to her and the hug to like solidify that there's nothing to forgive. Just because when Jamie's talking about how he was processing through Roy and Keeley's relationship, he ends on talking about how once he realized that it was real, that's when he started deleting everything from Keeley.
Right.
Like he had kept some stuff because he still held a flame for her. But once he saw how much they really cared for each other and loved each other, that's when he was like, all right, I'm not going to be the one to mess this up.
Fair enough. I think a good observation that I didn't pick up on. Definitely the biggest and I would say best story in this episode. Juno Temple did a great job as, again, Phil Dunster, who plays Jamie. Once again, excellent job.
Yeah, there are going to be lots of Emmy categories with multiple Ted Lasso nominations.
Well, I hope so. And then this brings us on to our final and very short story. And this is about
another
the team
infuriating
itself.
one for me.
Oh, really? I really
not for the same reasons. It's just because of where this story kind of ends, and I'm like, stop teasing me with it.
Well, Josh, lead the way. Tell us about the team.
So the team finds out about, what is it called? The Great Nudity?
The Great Awankening.
Awankening. The Great Awankening. And they immediately start kind of looking at stuff. But Isaac, being the good captain that he is, says, hey guys, don't. These are celebrities. These are people who had their stuff private or invaded or their private documents taken from them, hacked.
Yeah.
And just this is why you need to delete everything. And that leads to a big disagreement again from the team, where differing viewpoints are like, why should I delete anything? It's mine. And Sam even chimes in and says, hey, it's just because it's sent to you does not mean it's yours. Like you can enjoy it, but it should go away after so long. And Jamie chimes in, shares his opinion on it. And I believe it's Van Damme and Colin are both kind of like really obstinate about deleting their quote unquote private property.
Far from abstinent. Let's be real. Very far from abstinent, Josh.
Yes. Yeah. They got to change the vowels on those two words. They're too close together.
Van Damme is coming across a bit like a sex pest in this season, between this and the Amsterdam
the sex show. Yeah.
The sex show. But they basically come to a consensus that they're going to delete all of the explicit photos they've had sent to them. There was a really funny bit in this where they were trying to justify, or different players were trying to justify why they would keep it. So they were like, what if it's artsy? And they go, what defines artsy? And he's like, it's black and white and you can't see a head. Delete it. What if it's French like I am? Delete it. And they went through all of these ridiculous scenarios that just got more and more ludicrous. I thought that was really good. I actually think the best jokes in this episode landed in this very short story.
Yeah, I think Richard was the one that he got the biggest laugh for me, because I think his line was actually like, what if I'm French? Or like, I am French, therefore I should be able to keep these things, because the French are just openly sex pests.
Josh's words, not mine. I'm much closer to them than you are, Josh. So
I got the French Canadians to deal with. Don't worry.
Yeah, but they're harmless. They're Canadian. They'll apologize to you. I really like the joke at the start before all the stuff about the leaked photos, where Colin turns to Jamie and says, have you got any links I can use? Which is Axe, where you're from, Josh. And Jamie busts open the cupboard and he's like, do you want this one, this one, this one, this, and he's got all the different scents of links. And the last one is cookies and leather. And he says, "Oh, I'll have that one." And he goes, "Smart scent for a smart boy." And he throws the can at him. It's so throwaway, but really good.
I like that one a lot. I didn't catch that Lynx was Axe of the UK or something.
Yeah,
but
I think it's the same company.
Yeah, the context is there, so
yeah.
we understood it as well as far as the joke went.
Good. So, I mean, the thing is, so everyone agrees to delete the photos, and they all end up sitting there deleting all of the photos. But for obvious reasons that we've covered on this podcast, Colin is not comfortable deleting the photos that have been sent to him. So he leaves the changing room and he goes and sits on a sofa in a hall. I don't think Colin knows where a private place is, but he sits on a sofa in a corridor and starts to delete the photos. And Isaac comes along, and I'm assuming this is where your source of frustration is with this.
Yeah,
this story,
Isaac sees him leave, and Colin clearly has like a weird look on his face, like he doesn't want to do this. So Isaac follows him out, and he's like, "I told you delete these things." He's like, I will." And Colin like rips the phone out of his hands and sees that, oh, there's nude men on this phone screen that I'm now looking at. Takes a minute, looks back at Colin, hands him back his phone, takes a moment to compose himself, and just kind of walks away. And I was like, okay, we're coming back to it. This whole season has been about coming back to things. And no, this is where I got frustrated, because I'm like, stop teasing me with these moments that are going to be so good. I want it now.
Yeah, it was a really good moment in itself, though. I think Isaac, and once again, face acting, you could tell he was processing a lot when he saw that. And I think Colin as well. The
worry on his face. Yeah.
Well, it was worry, and I think there was a little bit of relief sprinkled in there as well. Every time someone finds out, I think Colin's a bit more relieved.
Yeah, because someone else knows, but he doesn't know how Isaac's truly going to react. So, like, either one way or another, something is going to happen that is going to kind of benefit Colin's life. He's either going to be out of football and he's going to be able to just be an openly gay man, or he's going to have an ally within the team.
Well, I hope, and I think, I don't know, we've made poor predictions on this podcast before. I hope it goes the good way, that Isaac is pleased, because
Isaac is a good boy. He wouldn't disappoint us.
I've enjoyed Isaac a lot, and if I have to not like Isaac because of bigoted views, I'll be very disappointed.
Yeah, that feels like a turn too far for him. I could see him having a conversation with Colin where he's like, "It's weird for me. It's probably going to be weird for us, but you're part of the team. You're part of our family. We're gonna do this together."
Yeah, I could see that. That sounds good. And that's kind of it, Josh. Like I said, a carrier episode where we move some stories along. Let's talk about how you felt about it. Give me a score out of 10 for this episode.
I think I would give it a 7 out of 10. The Keeley episode, or the Keeley storyline, really carries it. I do think the end of the Henry storyline is really good. The Nate storyline is cute. I don't think it really adds too much to the story overall. And then the team story, while unfinished, is really compelling. So I think I'd give it a 7 out of 10.
I think I agree. I maybe stretched to a 7.5. I enjoyed this episode. I don't feel like there was that much to talk about, but once again, we've nearly filled an hour.
Same thing with this show. Like we just broke it down in a way that we talked way more about what's happening in the scenes, talking about subtext and everything, and yet this episode went 55 minutes.
But I feel like the team's story, and I'm quote unquoting story there, purely is that scene with Colin and Isaac. That they're really going to set up for the next few episodes, and I hope we get more of it very immediately, rather than having to wait 2-3 episodes for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, 7 out of 10. I'm happy to go along with. Josh, I have a quiz for you.
All right.
I have a quiz, and I have in the past not done quizzes because I'm too lazy to write them. I have in the past Googled football quiz. This time I went and found a quiz that someone delivered to the cast of Ted Lasso to see how much they knew about football terms and stole that word for word. So effort levels are through the roof here. So I'm going to give you some terminology from football. There are bumper 7 questions here, Josh. So we'll rattle through them quickly. I'll give you some terminology. I just want you to tell me exactly what it means, okay?
Got it.
So question 1, clean sheet.
No penalties in a match.
Unfortunately, there's no goals. So a goalkeeper will keep a clean sheet. It means you haven't been scored against. If someone was to dummy, what would that mean?
I'm going to say screen the goalie.
Unfortunately, a dummy is where a ball is passed to you, pretend to take it, but it's actually being delivered to a player that's behind you. So it's a fake pass, basically. Nutmeg.
A seasoning.
Whilst that is correct, do you have an answer for the world of football or soccer?
When a goalie saves a shot but with his crotch.
You're very close with the crotch. It's actually when you pass the ball between your opposition's legs, it is a nutmeg. This is a hard one. What is a pea roller?
When the goalie stops the ball with his nuts. I'm going to say a penalty shot that never leaves the ground.
I am going to give you that one. It's a weak shot. It's not a penalty, but it's just a weak shot is a pea roller. So if I said Rosie.
That's the nosebleed sections in the stadium?
Absolutely correct. So if you kick it into Rosie, it means that you've shot well above the goal. The treble.
Crowd singing.
I see where you're coming from. It's actually, if you won 3 trophies in a season, it would be a treble.
Okay.
And finally, who are the Hammers?
Would that be West Ham?
That would be West Ham. Congratulations. That's 3 out of 7. You scored the same as... his name is escaping me. Nick Mohammed, who plays Nate Shelley.
Yes. Yeah.
I found out today that he hates football.
I actually, speaking of Ted Lasso quizzes, I just saw a tweet, I think yesterday morning, someone won a Ted Lasso trivia contest. I think they're using Kahoot. And so this person won first place, Jason won second, and then there was a third place winner. And as they were calling up the winners, the Jason who won second place was Jason Sudeikis.
Very good. This is like the story of, I can't remember who it is, but a celebrity entered a celebrity lookalike competition. No, it wasn't Charlie Chaplin. It's someone. It might be Charlie Chaplin, and they came third in their own lookalike competition.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. You've got me schooled there. Very good. So I have a story for you. It's not a mad story, but it's a couple of things from a player I really like, who is the captain of Aston Villa, John McGinn. And what you need to know about John McGinn is he is a player, and people describe him as playing with his arse because he has an enormous bum, and the way that he uses it is he backs into players and basically pushes them off the ball using his arse, therefore not getting a foul. So there's 2 stories. There's one about his time in Scotland at a club called St Mirren and the reason he left St Mirren. And then there's another story about a game he had for Aston Villa during COVID that you could hear what was said on the microphones on the TV. So St Mirren, the captain at the time was a man called Stephen Thompson, and they were running training drills, and one of the training drills was to dribble the ball around a post. Stephen Thompson was in front of John McGinn. Stephen Thompson hit the post with the ball, therefore failing the drill. As a joke, because he thought it was funny, he thought he'd pick the pole up and throw it at John McGinn, who was 21 at the time. What he actually did was threw it like a spear, and the pole impaled John McGinn's leg 7.5 centimeters in. He was told by a doctor that if it was a centimeter further, it would have torn an artery and he would have bled out. But it upset him so much. And Stephen Thompson, describes it as a prank. It upset him so much that it was one of the main factors of him leaving St Mirren, which I think is fair enough, really.
Yeah.
The story in the Premier League. So when football came back during COVID, they had this weird thing where they played without crowds. And one thing that you got that you never had before, they left all the microphones around the stadium. So normally you get loads of fan noise on the TV coverage. But in this, you could hear the players shouting at each other. It sounded like a training match because there was no crowd noise. And in a game at Villa Park, Villa versus Burnley, John McGinn went in on a late challenge on a Burnley player. And the manager of Burnley at the time, Sean Dyche, was very annoyed about this and was mouthing on the side of the pitch, and you could hear it all on TV. Sean Dyche has a very distinct voice. It's very gravelly, so you could tell it was him as well. Then John McGinn can audibly heard telling him to shut up, and Sean Dyche can audibly heard be saying, "You spent one season back in the Premier League and you think you're big time." And then John McGinn immediately replies with, "You spent 6 seasons in the Premier League and you still wear the same shit coat, you prick." And all of that was caught on the Sky Sports broadcast.
Nice.
It's very good. Yeah, John McGinn's great. That's it.
Let's next week's episode, just because I'm looking at it right now, it is called La Locker Room Au Follet, or La Locker Room Au Follet. Okay. Which translates to The Crazy Locker Room. The episode description is pretty simple. It's Colin and Isaac's friendship is tested. Roy is asked to do a press conference.
Wow, looking forward to that. Although that points to bad Isaac.
Well, I think it's going to be a conflicted Isaac. Like I hope it's not homophobic more than it's just like him being, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what's going on.
We'll talk about that next week.
Yep. So let's get on out of here. Give our socials. You can follow me on Twitter at Josh_Scar. You can obviously follow the podcast and Talking Lasso at Talking Smack Pod. We're also on Instagram. We are on Facebook, Hive Social, and post news, as well as Discord. And Joey, where can everyone find you? You can simply find me on the Talking Smack Discord. That's where you'll find me. If you want to follow anything else, my other podcast, Game Club Pod, is exactly that on Twitter and Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. Game Club Pod. Good fun. And if you're enjoying Talking Lasso, if you're enjoying Ted Lasso, feel free to send us an email at tsmackpod@gmail.com. And make sure the subject line says either Talking Lasso or Ted Lasso in all caps. Otherwise, I'm not going to see it between all the spam mail that I get from all the providers that I have dumped and moved on from. Nice. And in the immortal words of Ted Lasso, quoting Walt Whitman,
Be curious, not judgmental.
Now scram. Whistle, whistle.
Scram! Whistle! Whistle!